What if I told you the man who started a revolution, whose name is on some of the most famous guitars ever made, couldn't play a single chord? Forget the legends you think you know. The true story of the electric guitar isn't about one genius in a workshop. It's a bizarre tale of failed experiments, a forgotten inventor, a block of wood named the log, a kitchen utensil that looked like it belonged on a stove. And in this video, we're going to uncover how these strange ingredients cooked up the sound that defined a century. To understand why any of this happened, you have to go back to the 1930s, the age of swing. Orchestras were getting bigger, horns were getting louder, and the guitar. Well, the guitar was the quietest guy at the party. Guitarists were desperate. They needed a miracle just to be heard. What they got was this. So how on earth did a piece of cookware become the loudest voice on the planet? Welcome to the History Of, where we dig up the surprising stories behind the things you thought you knew. The roaring 20s had bled into the swinging 30s. Music was an escape from the harsh realities of the Great Depression, and the sound of that escape was loud. It was the sound of massive horn sections, pounding drums, and singers belting it out for the back row. And buried in the middle of that glorious noise was the guitarist, the backbone of the rhythm section, but sonically invisible. The guitar simply couldn't compete. In an orchestra of cannons, it was a pea shooter. Musicians were desperate for more volume. They tried everything, building bigger guitars, like Martin's massive dreadnoughts, or even building them out of metal with built-in resonators, like a banjo. But it was never enough. The solution wouldn't come from the world of woodworking. It would come from the buzzing, crackling new world of electronics. Hobbyists and tinkerers, the kind of guys with subscriptions to Popular Mechanics, were already messing around, strapping telephone parts and radio microphones to instruments. The results were terrible, but the idea was there. The world needed someone to connect the dots between the vibration of a string and the power of an amplifier. So who were the unlikely tinkerers who finally cracked the code? The history books often give the credit to one man, Les Paul, but that's not even close to the real story. The real story begins with these two guys. George Beauchamp was a vaudeville musician, obsessed with a single problem, being louder. Adolf Rickenbacker was a brilliant engineer who owned a tool and die shop. They were a perfect match of artistic need and technical know-how. After months of trial and error, they perfected a device that would change everything: the electromagnetic pickup. The science is pure elegance. A magnet creates a field. When a metal guitar string vibrates in that field, it creates a tiny electrical signal. Send that signal to an amplifier, and you turn a whisper into a roar. But here's the first bizarre twist in our story. This revolutionary technology wasn't first used for the jazz music of the day. It was built for the biggest musical craze of the 1920s, Hawaiian music. The lap steel guitar, played horizontally with a metal slide, was the sound of the islands, and it was taking America by storm. In 1932, Beauchamp and Rickenbacker put their pickup on a custom-built cast aluminum lap steel guitar. It was nicknamed the Frying Pan, and it was the first commercially successful electric guitar in history. It was a novelty, a strange-looking instrument for a niche market. But it worked. The problem of volume had been solved, just not for the people who thought they needed it most. And they weren't alone. The 1930s saw a chaotic gold rush of electric innovation, with dozens of companies trying to build a better mousetrap. Most of them have been lost to history. So they had a loud guitar, but it was a weird, clunky lap steel. To change the world, the technology needed a voice. It needed a hero, and he would arrive in the form of a jazz player who wanted his guitar to sound less like a guitar and more like a saxophone. This is Charlie Christian, and in 1936, he picked up the Gibson ES-150. It was one of the first commercially successful Spanish-style electric guitars, meaning you could play it standing up, like a normal guitar. Gibson priced the guitar and amplifier bundle at around $150, hence the name. But it wasn't the guitar that was revolutionary. It was what Christian did with it. Before him, guitarists played chords. They were part of the rhythm section. Charlie Christian played lines. He used the volume and sustain of his electric guitar to play solos with the power and phrasing of a horn player. For the first time, the guitar stepped out of the background and into the spotlight. When he joined Benny Goodman's band in 1939, the world heard it. The electric guitar wasn't just a rhythm instrument anymore. It was a lead voice, as expressive and dynamic as a trumpet or a clarinet. Tragically, Christian died from tuberculosis in 1942 at just 25 years old. But in his short career, he had written the rule book for every lead guitarist who would follow. But Charlie Christian's hollow body guitar had a screaming problem. At high volumes, the sound from the amplifier would make the body of the guitar vibrate, creating a vicious, howling loop of feedback. The very thing that made it loud also made it unusable for the next generation of even louder music. The solution was radical, and it came from two completely different minds. A celebrated musician who built a guitar out of a block of wood, and an accountant who couldn't even play one. This is Les Paul, a brilliant jazz guitarist and relentless inventor. He knew the hollow body was the source of the feedback. His solution? Get rid of it. In 1940, working on Sundays at the Epiphone factory, he built this, the log. It's a solid block of pine down the middle. The wings on the side? They were just for show, so the audience would still recognize it as a guitar. It was crude, but it worked. It had sustain and, crucially, no feedback. He took his creation to the biggest name in guitars, Gibson. They laughed him out of the room, famously calling his invention a broomstick with pickups. Les Paul's brilliant idea was shelved. Meanwhile, in California, an accountant and radio repairman named Leo Fender was tackling the same problem from a completely different angle. Leo wasn't a musician. He was a pragmatist. He saw guitars as tools that were too delicate, too expensive, and too hard to fix. He wanted to build an electric guitar like a Model T Ford, simple, rugged, and easy to mass produce. His design was genius in its simplicity. A solid body of wood to kill feedback. A neck that just bolted on so it could be easily replaced. All the electronics mounted on one piece of plastic. It wasn't fancy, but it was a workhorse. In 1950, he released it as the Fender Broadcaster. Well, after a quick legal tiff with Gretsch Drums over the name, it was rechristened the Telecaster. It was the world's first mass-produced solid-body electric guitar, and it took the music world by storm. Suddenly, Gibson wasn't laughing anymore. Fender, the upstart radio guy, was eating their lunch. They realized they needed a solid-body guitar, and fast. So they called the one guy they knew had already built one. In 1952, they finally partnered with Les Paul, creating a fancier, more luxurious solid body to compete with Fender's blue-collar Telecaster. The Gibson Les Paul was born. And with that, the greatest rivalry in music history was born. Fender versus Gibson, the artist's vision versus the engineer's pragmatism. Two different philosophies that would define the sound of everything to come. The feedback was dead. The solid body guitar was born. The instrument was now a blank canvas, ready for a new generation of artists to paint with sound. But no one could have predicted the colors they would use, or that the first true rock and roll guitarist would be a woman singing gospel music. Long before Elvis, before Chuck Berry, before any of the men who would be called the kings of rock and roll, there was the godmother, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, a gospel singer who played the electric guitar with a fire and fury that was unheard of in the 30s and 40s. She was one of the first artists to use heavy distortion, pushing her amplifier into a raw, gritty overdrive that would become the cornerstone of rock music. Tharpe's sacred sound laid the groundwork for the secular explosion to come. Artists like Chuck Berry took that energy and put the electric guitar at the absolute center of the show. With his clever lyrics, showmanship, and a guitar style built on punchy double stops and string bends, Berry wrote the textbook for rock and roll guitar. The electric guitar was becoming more than an instrument. It was a dividing line, a symbol of rebellion. In 1965, when folk hero Bob Dylan plugged in at the Newport Folk Festival, the backlash was immediate. His own fans called him a traitor, a Judas, for abandoning the purity of acoustic music. It was a cultural flashpoint. The old guard versus the new, electric, amplified future. And that future was coming from across the Atlantic. The British invasion took the American blues and rock and roll that they loved, cranked it up, and sold it back to the world. The Kinks pioneered the raw, simple power chord, laying the foundation for hard rock and punk. The guitar was now the official symbol of youth, energy, and defiance. The guitar further became a symbol of rebellion. It was loud, it was exciting, and it was in the hands of a generation ready to change the world. But one man would take that symbol and turn it into a weapon of artistic expression, making sounds no one thought possible. And he'd do it by playing the American national anthem in a way it had never been heard before. Jimi Hendrix didn't just play the electric guitar. He explored it. He took the sounds that other guitarists considered mistakes, the screech of feedback, the fuzz of distortion, and turned them into a new musical language. He was a sonic pioneer, masterfully using effects like the wah-wah pedal and the univibe to create textures and sounds no one had ever imagined. And nowhere was his genius more apparent than on a muddy field in upstate New York in the summer of '69. As the final act of Woodstock, Hendrix took the stage and launched into a version of the Star-Spangled Banner. It was a protest and a prayer, all at once. He used feedback and his whammy bar to conjure the sounds of rockets, bombs, and screams, transforming the national anthem into a powerful, searing commentary on the state of the nation. It wasn't just a guitar solo. It was the sound of a generation, a moment in history captured on 6 strings. Hendrix had taken the electric guitar to its absolute limit. He'd made it scream, cry, and talk. So where could it possibly go from there? Well, in the decades that followed, it would get heavier, faster, and eventually, it would disappear altogether. After Hendrix, the floodgates opened. The guitar got heavier, spawning the thunderous riffs of heavy metal. It got faster and angrier, fueling the raw 3-chord energy of punk rock. The guitar became so iconic that by the 2000s, you didn't even need a real one to be a rock star. Video games like Guitar Hero introduced the instrument as power and iconography to a generation that had never even held one, turning legendary riffs into a global phenomenon. But the instrument itself was also evolving. Today, digital modeling guitars can perfectly mimic hundreds of vintage instruments with the twist of a knob. MIDI guitars don't even need to sound like guitars at all. They're versatile controllers that can play any sound you can imagine. And now, artificial intelligence can analyze your playing and give you real-time feedback, transcribe a solo from a recording instantly, or even compose a brand new song from a simple text prompt. Even the way guitars are built is changing. As traditional tone woods become endangered, makers are turning to sustainable and innovative materials, ensuring the guitar has a future that's as green as it is loud. With guitars that can sound like anything, and AI that can write a hit song with the click of a button, what does it even mean to be a guitarist anymore? From a desperate need to be heard in a noisy jazz club, to a symbol of rebellion that defined a generation, to a digital tool that can be anything you imagine. The story of the electric guitar is a story of innovation, happy accidents, and unlikely heroes. It wasn't just about making an instrument louder. It was about giving a voice to the voiceless, a sound to new ideas, and a roar to a cultural revolution. From a frying pan to the future, it's a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes start with the simplest problems. What's the most iconic guitar riff of all time? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more surprising histories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.